welcome to Be Hero Media. I'm Tom,
And I'm Brian.
and we are here to discuss
Or Fuss.
over what's new
What's trending?
and what is to come
Giggity.
in pop culture.
All right, guys. So we took a couple of weeks off from posting everything because we had a lot of catch up to do, as well as we just needed a mental break and some health concerns we had to take care of. But we're all back. We're ready to go and ready to do this. And it's
Yes,
right time for that too, because we are going to be talking about Batman, the
for the
Cape
next few
Crusader himself.
episodes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Uh, So the Batman has come out with last couple of weeks, as well as it's just doing gangbusters in the box office right now. It's actually set to be the second highest grossing movie of the year, right behind Spider-Man.
yeah.
So it's going to be doing great stuff. If you guys haven't had a chance to see it, please go see it. But with that being said, before we do our review, which will be coming next week, we are going to go ahead and rank the best Batman movies from worst to best, in our opinion.
Yes. And to clarify, so it'll be all the Batman movies that are, Batman movies. They will be live action movies. We're not gonna throw in the Mask of Phantasm or whatever it was called. We will not
Right.
be doing Batman v Superman or the Justice League. We are going to be doing the, just the core Batmans that we grew up with, that we all know and love, and that are, and including the recent ones. So.
That's right. So this list will include the Batman, but we will not be spoiling anything about it in this episode.
Right. This will be a ranking, and we'll have a little bit of a debate over each ranking. And there will be 9 films that we will be discussing for today's episode.
Yep.
So,
All right.
I mean, with that being said, I guess first off, we do want to hear from you guys. Let us know how you would rank these movies. Hit us up on our social medias: facebook.com/BeHeroMedia, Instagram.com/BeHeroMedia.
On Twitter, also at Be Hero Media, as well as everything that is Be Hero at BeHeroMedia.com. Also, drop a like and a subscribe and hitting that notification bell right here on YouTube as you're dropping a comment in on your thoughts right here.
Exactly. With that being said, though, let's go ahead and just kind of jump in.
Yeah. So let's do this step by step. So you do 9, I'll do 9, and we'll just talk about it for a second, and we'll go all the way down to 1.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
okay?
So, starting at the bottom for me, um, Batman Forever, which,
I mean, it's kind of a duh.
yeah, I mean, Batman Forever, it's all right. Gah. And actually, like, I know that's not gonna be everyone's. I know a lot of people would say Batman and Robin, but Batman Forever just really didn't work for me. And I'll explain why I like Batman and Robin a little bit more in a minute. But Batman Forever, even though yes, we got a nice zany Riddler with Jim Carrey, and we got to see a very different side of Tommy Lee Jones as Two Face. Uh, really, nothing about that one worked for me. I had a hard time getting through it, even as a kid. So I just yeah.
But for me, I actually agree with you as 9 for Batman Forever. But mine's a little bit different. So we went from Batman in 1989, featuring Michael Keaton, and then Batman and Robin in 91, also featuring Michael Keaton, which were more serious,
No,
less
it
campy.
was
Or Batman
Batman
Returns.
Returns.
Yes, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Uh, that also features Michael Keaton and were done by Tim Burton, which were a lot more serious and a little bit darker for what they
Mhm.
were. And then they started moving with the Joel Schumacher movies into more of the campy Adam West style Batman 66, which is what you get from Batman and Robin, or Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. But Batman Forever is kind of the in between, where it was between what Burton was doing and then what eventually becomes with Batman and Robin. And as such, nothing works with it. You don't get any good
And as much as
lines.
I
You
love
don't
Val
get any
Kilmer,
camp. Yeah,
yeah, like Val Kilmer, just not a good Bruce Wayne or Batman.
no.
as much as I love him otherwise, you know.
Well, like if you look at it too, like the only saving graces for that movie were the bits from Jim Carrey and the bits from Tommy Lee Jones, right? Nothing else really works in that movie. Chris O'Donnell doesn't work in that movie. Oh, okay, I lied. There's one line in that movie that I laugh at every time I hear it, but it goes back to them trying to be more campy. Is when they're on the Riddler's little like island thing. They're walking, and he looks back and goes, "Holy rusted metal, Batman!" And Batman's like, "What?" And he goes, "It's metal, and it's holy and rusted." And it's like you could see what they're trying to do, but because they were in between and they weren't really doing anything yet, it didn't work at all. Also, do you remember who the love interest in
Yeah.
that movie was?
I really don't.
That was Nicole
It's been so
Kidman
long.
playing Morgan
Oh, dang.
Chase. Uh, she that's how like that movie was. She's forgettable. Did you remember that Drew Barrymore was in that movie?
No, I didn't.
She played one of the Two Faces ladies. She played the light one, by comparison to the dark one. So there's a bunch of great cameos and a bunch of people in there, but the movie was just not good and was so forgettable, which is worse than being bad. So that being
Yeah.
said, number 8.
So number 8, Batman and Robin. Yeah. Surprise. So here's the thing. The couple reasons why I put that one above Batman Forever. For one, you know, even though it's campy and ridiculous, George Clooney was still a good Bruce Wayne. Um, he just was. And you know what? My kids love that. It's probably their favorite Batman movie, just because it is so colorful and ridiculous. You know, you have Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze. You have that over the top Bane. I don't even remember who played him, but
He's a
Bane,
pro
just like
wrestler.
so much going on there. Was he?
Yeah,
Uma Thurman as Poison Ivy. Like everything about that movie is just over the top ridiculous. And it's not that it's good, but at least like it has it's closer in some ways character wise to some of these characters, which I like. I can't even say that seriously, but somehow it's closer than than Batman Forever. But again, like at least like kids love it. I do remember actually enjoying that one as a kid. My kids absolutely adore that one. Um, but it is very difficult to get through
it is, and
for me as an adult.
8. That was my 8 as well. Um, and it's very similar things. What it is, it's where it goes to so far beyond bad and campy. It's good. In pop like a cult classic style, kind of like Toxic Avenger, where you have something that's just
Yeah,
so over the top and everything. It's just like it's hilarious. And forget that it was solely a toy commercial through the whole thing, but
yeah,
it looks like everybody on that set was having fun too. Like you don't watch them, especially like with the way that Arnold and Uma Thurman are interacting with everybody. Like, yeah, there's no way that these people rolled on the set and be like, "Oh, I'm not having fun with this line." Ooh, look at that scenery. Let me just
yeah,
right. It's it,
yeah. The one-liners are
so good,
super fun.
which does make it better than Batman Forever because it doesn't take itself serious anymore. It just gave up trying. So,
Yeah.
but all right, number 7.
All right. So number 7, Batman Returns for me. Um, this one there are good things. I actually like Catwoman the most in this one. The Penguin plot, everything, and like I don't know, the route they chose to go with him just didn't work for me. Um, I know that in the comics at the time, a lot of it majoritively like it was actually pretty close aesthetically to who Penguin was, but it just didn't work for me. Especially with the darker undertones that Tim Burton had already established. It, yeah, I guess it did kind of match the zaniness, but I don't know. It just wasn't for me.
I can get that. And for some people, that's how it's going to be. And you're a hater in most things, so it makes sense. But
That is not true.
For me, my number 7 was actually Batman 66 with Adam West. I enjoyed the heck out of that movie, but on the list of best Batman movies, it's not towards the top at all for me. I was number 7 because it is one of those things that's just so far ridiculous. It just is not quality. But there are some great one-liners. It's really funny. I mean, you can't, not laugh when you watch Batman for almost 5 minutes running around with a bomb, and then eventually goes and like, sometimes you just can't get rid of a bomb because every time he was trying, there was some other shenanigan or something like that. Even Robin, like, it's like there's a whole like bar full of like degenerates and evil people. You could throw it in there, and Batman's like anybody can be redeemed, right? Like it's all good. But in comparison to the remainder of these ones, I actually think it's lower on the tier for them. Some of these not by much, but it is for me. So my number 7 is actually Batman 66. Uh,
That's and that is kind of what I was expecting to hear from you. And um mine's a little bit higher up, and I'll explain why shortly. But I'll go ahead and go into my next one because it's going to be a very unpopular opinion, but I'm going to explain why. So my next one is just Tim Burton's Batman. Um, and it's not that I don't like this Batman, but there are things about this one and Batman Returns. For one, in both of them, Batman's a murderer. That is not my Batman. That is not comic book Batman. Really speaking, if you look in the that's just not who he is. That's not what he represents. That's not what he does. And that's something that I think that Zack Snyder also really missed the mark on with how he portrayed him. But
who does Batman murder?
that being said, he drops a grenade on someone in one of them, and uh, that there. I know in both of them he kills people, but it's been a long time. Um, But that being said, there are things that I really enjoy about the movie. I think Jack Nicholson was great. I do think that Michael Keaton is a great Bruce Wayne. Even for the time, early '90s, we're like we hadn't figured out superhero movies, but um, I think Michael Keaton was ahead of his time for it. I think that we've seen better Bruce Waynes now and better Batmans. Not, I don't think we've ever had a perfect combination of them yet, but I think Michael Keaton was one of the best. Um, he definitely stands alone in that regard, but the movie itself just didn't. I don't know. For some reason that whole quadrilogy, I guess, just didn't quite do it for me.
Okay. I mean,
But I do like that one.
I guess that, to each their own. I enjoyed the Batman. It's from 1989 with Michael Keaton. I That was my first foray into a Batman anything really at the time. So it's got a special place in my heart, and it's also higher in the list for me because of such. But my number 6 is actually The Dark Knight Rises. Uh, I really have tried to enjoy this movie, and there are aspects of it I do enjoy. But this is the same thing I've talked about before. It has it's not bad. It's just not good either. It's forgettable. Like unless you like ponder and think about it, there's not a lot of great things. Bane is probably the best thing about it. But if you remember, do you remember who the bad guy is in the movie? Like who the big bad is?
I mean Talia.
That's exactly right. Talia al Ghul, who ends up
Yeah,
become like switching and doing a whole with the twist at the end, right? Uh
right.
But you talk to people, they're gonna ask. You're gonna be like, "Oh, who's the big bad?" Oh, Bane, because that's what the marketing. That's how they sold it and everything else. You don't realize it's Talia until the end. There's nothing going into it until then, and it just does not get a good payoff. Plus, the movie is long and it feels long. It was not for me. It was not good at all for me. So that's why it ends up as my number 6. Again, it's better than some of these other ones, but it's because it's the culmination, I think, of the end of that. And maybe it's because it's so hard to follow such a great movie in The Dark Knight. But yeah, that's my number 6.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have that one ranked a little bit higher, but I'll get into that when I get to it. Mine is Batman 66. Surprise! Which I do actually love and adore Batman 66.
This is your number 4.
Uh,
Or number 5, I'm sorry?
mm, yes, number
Okay,
5.
mine was
Sorry,
actually number 6 for the Dark Knight. I skipped one on my numbering.
gotcha. Yeah, yeah. My number 5 here. So Batman 66. Um, yeah, I mean it's definitely over the top campy. It is very very ridiculous. Kind of in the same vein of just a lot of what was going on in the 60s with superheroes. The Spider-Man, Spider. The old cartoon. There was a bunch of crazy shenanigans, but I do enjoy it. That whole bomb scene to me just hits my funny bone. It very much in like a childish, in the same way that I loved the Three Stooges when I was a kid. I loved this movie. Um, does it hold up? No, of course not. But but because I was definitely much younger when I first saw it, and it just kind of stuck with me. And it's a guilty pleasure of mine. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's where I have it.
again, to each their own. I enjoy the Batman 66 still, and I do watch it. Um, I know my 6 and 7, which is Batman 66 for 7 and Dark Knight Rises for 6. I could flip on those 2 and not be really too upset because they're so close there. I think the only reason I end up having Rises above Batman 66 is just because it is the culmination and Bane is that good in what he's doing. But outside of that, like Batman 66, it's fantastic in its campiness and everything it did.
Yeah.
Um, my number 5, proper number 5 this time, uh, for it is Batman Return. Uh, for some of the similar reasons you talked about, where it doesn't, not every beat works, but I love the stories that they did with Catwoman as everything that happened with her and Christopher Walken, where he kills her and she comes back, and then the love between Bruce and her, which you feel through the movie as you're watching it back. Uh, even so, when like there's a scene where they're dancing together at a ball that Bruce Wayne's throwing, when they both recognize that they're Catwoman and Batman, and they're like, "What do we do? Do we like?" Catwoman's like, "What do we do now? Do we fight like that?" And Batman's like, "No, we don't need to do that. We can just enjoy each other." And then the stuff with Penguin, like man, the Danny DeVito was made to be Penguin for that, man. It was like perfect casting for that. And then do you remember who his father is?
I don't.
It's Pee Wee Herman.
Ha!
Pee Wee Herman plays Oswald Cobblepot's father in that movie. And then he reprises that role in Gotham, by the way. He plays the father of Oswald Cobblepot in that one too.
Gotcha.
Uh, but it was so enjoyable and it's so Tim Burton dark in a great way that it was a great sequel to it. The only thing I think that was a problem with it is the rush on it. So you had two things going on at that time in '91 for Batman Returns. So Batman was such a big hit in '89
Mhm.
that Warner Brothers was like, we gotta do another one right now. So they flipped and turned on that and started doing Batman Returns. Actually, two other things in the general. So it was a quick turnaround, so the script and everything else like that. In addition to that, they were also working on the Batman animated series,
Mhm.
trying to get that on the floor going because they wanted to tie it into '89's Batman and everything else that went there. And lastly, uh, Tim Burton's like mind and thoughts were split because his side project he was wanting to work on for years got greenlit to do, but he couldn't direct it. He had to only produce it, but he was always over there doing everything with it. Do you know what that is?
If I had to guess, The Nightmare Before Christmas.
The Nightmare Before Christmas. He was in
Nice.
all like totally involved in doing that, but couldn't direct it. Uh, while he was also working on Batman Returns, so I think it suffered a bit for that. But even that, like, I think it did really good. It was really, really enjoyable for myself. And again, I grew up with these movies, so for me, this was Batman. But
Which
all
makes
right,
sense. And like I said, I don't it's not that I don't like these movies. Those two, Batman Returns and Tim Burton's Batman. But they're not as high up for me. I also watched them much later. Um I think the first one that I
of
watched was
course you
actually
did.
so I did actually watch Batman and Robin as a kid, and I'm pretty sure I watched Batman Forever as a kid as well. But I didn't watch Tim Burton's Batman or Batman Returns till I was probably in my 20s. Yeah, go me. But One thing I did
Mm.
forget to say about Batman 66, that movie is directly responsible for inspiring my original Be Hero logo with the POW symbol. I remember when I made that, I was thinking of, you know, more so the series, but that, they do that in the movie a little bit.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah,
it's called
anyways,
onomatopoeia.
so it did inspire Be Hero to a point. Uh,
All
all
right,
right,
number 4.
yeah. So my next up is The Dark Knight Rises, um, which I can definitely understand why it was lower on your list, and it definitely understand why it would be lower on a lot of people's. It's higher on mine for a couple reasons. For one, my absolute favorite uh graphic novel is with Batman not Nightwing, no, not shit,
Nightfall.
Nightfall. That's it. Ah,
Yep.
my favorite one. And I forgot the name. How
Right.
ridiculous. Um,
Especially one that involves Bane that's breaking someone's back.
yeah. So I actually have all the original comics from the comic book run before it was turned into a novel. So I have all the original comics. I absolutely love that storyline. So on the one hand, I was just so excited for that pinnacle moment of Bane breaking Batman's back and then his kind of redemption. And I know that it doesn't really follow the story other than just like a couple key moments. Not
Mhm.
many, but a couple. Um but I like definitely I was so excited to get that. I love Tom Hardy. I thought that he did great as Bane. I didn't necessarily think that the route they chose to go with Bane was awesome. Him just being in a lot of pain and that makes him strong. Yeah, I don't know. I I think that they could have been a little bit more true to the character, but at the same time, like, yes, I was very much caught up in the novelty of it. I definitely love Tom Hardy. I actually didn't mind the twist with Talia al Ghul. She kind of that like anything that she's involved in any of the comic book stories, that's kind of how it usually ends up. It's like, oh surprise, it was me, lover boy. But I don't know. At
Not
least
really. Like she's involved in the comics. She's more blatant. Her and Raish are both like uh more adamant about like you know, hey detective as they call them. You know, this is what's going on. We are involved. Stay out of our way or join us. One of the
I don't.
two. It's not really that they hide.
She no, I don't know. I'm sure there's actually plenty of that, but I guess the ones that I'm more familiar with is definitely her stringing him along, leading him on, twisting his view, and so he ends up helping her so often. There's so many stories where he ends up helping
Well,
her, and then yeah, she has her hidden agenda, flips it on him, and now he's got to escape
mm,
her, grasp as well. That's what I'm used to, and so when I watched Dark Knight Rises, that's what it felt like to me.
yeah, for me it was the opposite. Like she was hiding away who she was, which does not feel like a Talia al Ghul thing from the comics. I agree with you. Like there are many ones, majority of them, where she's stringing him along. She's got her own agenda, and Batman kind of recognizes it, like the whole creation of Damian Wayne.
Yeah.
So I totally get that part, but there are many of them, or there are not really any of them where she's hiding who she is. Her or Raish aren't hiding behind somebody else. They're more blatant about this is us doing a thing, but this is our reasons why. And then you find out the reasons are not as great as they seem, or they are all for some other thing.
Right, but and we are still talking about the Nolan verse, though. Bane was nothing like how he is in the comics. Um, you know, th- so I guess to me, like there was enough elements that I bought into it, but I definitely see your point and see what you're getting at. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, that
All right,
one's mine.
and so for my 4, I'm actually at the opposite end of that trilogy. Mine's Batman Begins. I enjoyed it. I liked a lot of the stuff that they did where they were, going to his training before he became Batman. This was like a Batman Year Zero story, which was really cool. Uh, so it's part of the things I enjoy. I just the part that I really didn't like in almost all of the Batman trilogies, like the Dark Knight trilogies, was Christian Bale. Didn't
Mhm.
really like him as like Bruce Wayne or Batman. He's a good actor, and I do enjoy him other things, but I just don't feel like he was right for this. But some of the greatest parts about the Dark Knight trilogies are the ensemble cast, and you don't get as much in the Batman, or the Batman Begins, excuse me. Um, I like some of the stuff that they did, where they have Henri Ducat, who's uh, oh, my brain just turned off. Liam Neeson's character is Henri, and Henri is actually the one that taught Bruce to be a detective because Henri was a French detective. And then you find out the twist in this was he's actually Ra's al Ghul as the title of Ra's al Ghul. I like that concept, and everything. You also had Ken Watanabe in there as the Ra's of the time when he's training with the League of Assassins and everything else. I like some of that stuff. Scarecrow was great in this movie, and so on. Uh, Katie Holmes not so much as Rachel Dawes. Didn't care much for her character.
Yeah.
Uh, but all in all, it was a good story and a good beginning story. But their Batman was probably one of the weakest Batmen, in my opinion. Um, so it goes lower on my list. It's still number 4, but it could have been higher if they had a better Batman.
I can see that. This is where our lists are definitely gonna really differ.
If they haven't
um,
already.
well, so my next is The Dark Knight.
Number
Um,
3, the Dark. Wait, you have the Dark Knight lower on your list than Batman Begins.
yeah, I always have.
Okay.
So when I heard you say that, I was like, "Oh, we're gonna fight. I'm gonna, I'm gonna suplexorcist you."
Sir Plexorcist me. Okay.
That was a funny meme, and you know it. um. Anyways, so for me, it is The Dark Knight. Don't get me wrong. Like, love the movie. It is a fantastically directed, incredibly told story. Um, not too much that I can say negative about this movie, but what I can say is that this for me is where Christian Bale didn't work anymore. For me, he was actually fine in Batman Begins. In The Dark Knight, he went from like being a good Bruce Wayne in Batman Begins, uh, being a very rageful Batman in Batman Begins to now he's just like barking. This was when like College Humor and what is it, Funny or Die. This is where like they got all of their source material. Like it started from The Dark Knight, making fun of like the mockery of Batman that we know and love today. Which, don't get me wrong, they do a great job and it is funny. But it is because of it started with this movie. It did not start with Batman Begins. It started with this movie. He went way over the top with his way over the top. It didn't work. It wasn't good. He was no longer a charming Bruce Wayne. Now, part of that is, yes, the source material. But I think this is where Christian Bale stopped working altogether as Batman. And yet, everything else about this movie, even though Christian Bale failed as both roles, everything else about this movie was so superb and so phenomenal that it elevated it to what it is. Literally one of the greatest superhero movies of all time. Um, but this is my list. So
I mean,
this
it's
is
true.
this is where this is where I'm ranking it, and that's why, um, yeah, the so much that can be said good about this movie, but Christian Bale was the weak link with that, and he was a weak link with The Dark Knight Rises, but um, I didn't think he was the weak link in Batman Begins, but we'll come around to that.
So guys, just so you know, his name is Tom. So please make sure to throw Tom all the shade when you go into the comments.
Go for it. I
Again,
don't
that's
care.
Tom, Tom.
I don't care.
So for me, my list, my number 3 on my list is Batman '89 with Michael Keaton. Uh, and this is only on the list at number 3 because the next two are just that some more superior. They're on three because it was 1989. There were some limitations they can do. They were still trying to sell toys for the things. They were still trying to market it to a younger audience and everything else. Uh, so there was limitations that they had to deal with, and that's about the extent of the reasons I even put this on as number three and not closer to number one. But I enjoyed the Batman. In 1989, you have to remember, like, this is right after the Dark Knight Returns comic book run that they did. The beginning of the darker side of Batman coming back to being darker side. Because before that, you had, the comics code stuff that they couldn't really do a super dark Batman.
Mhm.
It wasn't until Frank Miller did the Dark Knight Rises story run that they did in '87, I think it was, that he
Dark Knight. It wasn't the Dark Knight
they,
Rises. What was it called? Uh,
or Dark Knight Returns, excuse me.
yeah, there we go.
the the Dark Knight Returns in '87, where they started making it darker again, and that's actually what drove the Batman '89 to become a film and everything else that went to it. In fact, Tim Burton references that Frank Miller run as like something he went for when he was creating his. And you don't see a ton of it because they are limited again by what Warner Bros. Wanted to do, but you can feel that darker energy,
Yeah.
especially relevant to Adam West. I mean, you have to remember, you had Adam West's Batman '66, and then you had this, and that's apples to rotten fruit kind of darkness, right? Not saying that the movie was bad because it's rotten fruit; it's just how dark it was. Uh, so it was so good, and I enjoyed it so much. So that's my number three.
Yeah. Uh, Definitely understand. I can't really say much against that. I mean, these are personal lists after all, and I definitely understand why that one is so heralded by so many people. So the next one on my list is The Batman, the newest one starring Robert Pattinson.
Really?
Yeah, that is my second. Um, and at the moment, that is my second. I've only seen it the one time. I absolutely loved it. We're gonna talk more about it in detail next week. We're going to do a spoiler-filled review. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, I loved everything about this movie. There's not much that didn't work for me. Um, but it didn't quite take number one for me, and nobody's gonna like my reasoning why. But that's okay. We'll get to that in a minute.
All right. My number two was the one I was debating about the most, whether to be number one or number two. Like these two were right neck and neck with each other. But my number two is actually The Dark Knight, uh, because it was such a great movie and had everything. The only thing that brought it down for me was Christian Bale, as you mentioned earlier, was so weak in this one. But the ensemble cast, Heath Ledger in particular, was so good. Michael Caine as Alfred was fantastic in this movie. I
Yeah,
watched it just recently. It was so good. Even Maggie Gyllenhaal taking over as Rachel Dawes in this makes up for so much of it. Uh, you get Jim Gordon, done by Gary Oldman in
mm,
this, who was so good. I mean, he was in Batman Begins too, but he has such a more pivotal role in
yeah,
this that it makes it so good. Like everything hits, and even the stuff that's lacking where it comes to Christian Bale. In fact, I swear that they almost went out of their way to do limited of like less amount of time of Bruce Wayne on and Batman on TV, like on the screen, than it was
yeah,
everybody else. Like very rarely do you ever see him by himself.
yeah,
You get more Joker time. You get Two Face stuff in there a lot more. You get scenes where it's just Gordon in there and not Bruce. So this is a more of an ensemble
yeah.
piece, and I think it works better as that.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, and
So,
and the arc of Two Face, incredible. That was just top notch
mhm.
storytelling. Um, yeah, that, that
Long
movie is
Halloween.
amazing. Um, so my number one,
Numero
surprise.
uno.
So my number one is Batman Begins. Actually, still to this day, there are a few reasons. For one, Batman Begins is what got me back into comic books and superheroes as a whole. Um, you know, So I saw this. It was a couple years after it came out. This would have been I would have been 19 when I finally saw it. Um, and up until that point, from about 14 to 19, I was too cool for comic books, too cool for superheroes, all that kind of stuff. So like I just wasn't about it. But when I finally, one of my friends finally convinced me, he was like, "You just need to watch it. Just watch it." So I watched it, and I fell in love with comic books as a whole again. I fell in love with Batman again, more so than ever. And for the longest time, because of this movie alone, Batman was my favorite superhero. Um, it's different now, but he's still like he's always gonna be in my top three. Um, and that is directly due to this movie.
Scarecrow.
I loved Scarecrow. I just thought he was phenomenal. I thought he was the I in my opinion, he is the most terrifying Batman villain that we have seen on the screen right now. Um, the scenes that he's in, what he did was very intense. I loved it. Um, and he like Scarecrow is I don't know, maybe because I'm a horror head, horror buff, right? But he is kind of one of my favorite Batman villains to begin with. Um, yeah, Liam Neeson killed it as Ra's al Ghul. Even though it was a very different take on who Ra's al Ghul would be, he did a
Yeah.
phenomenal job. So really, this movie, like, there's really not anything for me that didn't work. Again, I already said it before, but this was Christian Bale worked as Bruce Wayne. We actually got to see a very charming playboy billionaire as Bruce Wayne, right? Someone who was like just so confident and comfortable with himself that he would in a $10,000 suit just suddenly go dip in a pool with some cute girls, right? While everyone's like, "What is your political opinion?" He's like, "I'm here to have fun." Like that is Bruce Wayne, right? And at the same time, like I said before, he was a rageful Batman. He hadn't felt that justice yet. He hadn't really like redeemed his character. He hadn't resolved his parents' death in his head yet. So to me, it was just the perfect culmination of what Batman should be. Is it corny that he used bats in a scene? Sure, but like he does it all the time in the comics, so I liked it. Really, there's nothing about this movie that I didn't like. Start to finish, this is my favorite Batman movie of all time.
Uh, I can definitely see that for some people. Again, it didn't play for me as well. I just don't think it worked in that same vein. I liked the concept that Bruce Wayne coming back in, even as Bruce Wayne coming back after 10 years being abroad, is going to be estranged from everybody. He doesn't know how to manage both lives yet, and I don't feel like that dichotomy was done properly. If you will read the Batman Year One series, which Batman Begins is loosely based off of, it that dichotomy is not there yet. He doesn't know how to be Bruce Wayne. He only ends up being Batman and wants to do all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And there are some things in Batman Begins that are really good, like him contemplating killing Joe Chill with a gun until he doesn't, at the beginning of the movie and things like that. There are a lot of great things for it. It just didn't work for me, and they worked for you, which is great. So my number one is actually a similar starting story. It's The Batman, the new one from 2022 with Robert Pattinson. I enjoyed the Ever Living Star. We'll go over the review here next week on it and our thoughts about it. But I think that it nailed exactly what I would expect for a character like Batman or Bruce Wayne to go through for all the stuff. They they nail everything in a great way, and then also do it with the Riddler in a great way. That like there's a lot of good in this that makes sense. So far it's been the best one, and I've only seen it the one time too, but I have played it in my head multiple times. So I think this one does take the cake for me on the bat or over the Dark Knight, only because this is also such a great story that they could essentially do this story without the superhero element and it still play really well.
Yeah. I definitely could agree. And honestly, I do think there's potential. Part of the reason why I like Batman Begins so much is because I've seen it so many times and I like it just every time it's entertaining and holds up. This one, The Batman, I think after a couple more viewings, like, I definitely not just want, I need to see it again. Like, I want to keep processing it. This one could actually take over as number 1 for me. At the moment, though, it hasn't yet, and I think it's more than anything, it's just because I don't have enough exposure to it.
That makes sense. So, well, guys, let us know what you think. Throw down your top 9 in order for worst to best for your Batmans as well. To let us know what your thoughts are. And please make sure to spell out Tom, Tom, and tell him why his is wrong. So,
And
but
anyone
guys,
who's
thank you
closest to
so much.
me, I'll will invite you on the show.
Wow.
Yeah, I got nothing.
Talk about bribing people. Jeez. Anyhow, but guys, thank you for joining us this week for another great episode. We're gonna keep trying to go through to get these out as weekly as best we can. But you guys have been so great and everything else. We're trying to keep up with everything that we're dropping between this and the bump card and everything else that's Be Hero Media. Thank you guys again. So, Tom, do we have anything else?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, guys, catch us next week for that Batman review and keep following us because we'll be doing a few more Batman and superhero related things coming up. But until then, so guys, go out there and as
And
always, be
be
a
a
hero.
hero.